I want to get down to real understanding of other people. So thousands of years ago in Mesopotamia, there was there were a lot of movements afoot to shuffle gods. You would have a god of rain, a god of wheat, god of fertility, and some of these gods became known as gods of particular cities. So, like, if it were the Bay Area, right, Berkeley would be, the god of, free thinking. San Francisco would be the god of love, and Fremont would be the god of, productivity. And Silicon Valley, like Santa Clara would be like the god of ingenuity, right? You So they had their gods they worshipped, and previous rulers up until a certain point, 4,000 something BC, had always said, my God may or may not come, I may not have a lineage with my God, but I represent for my God, and my God might represent my town. And so when I go out into the world and say, hey, I'm from, God of technology, and people would say, right on, we dig the God of technology. Everybody likes technology. Thank you for providing God of technology, for providing God. And that we're also like God of rain over here, and, in Sacramento Valley with God of rain, right? That's where we grow all the food. So, respect, right? And the other person would say, fuck yeah, we love the God of rain. Bring the rain, bring the food. That's good. We got some technology to sell you if you bring those tomatoes on in, right? So that's what it'd be like. And then someone came along with the idea that, like, my God is better than your God. Your God needs to go the fuck away because my God, I got all these temples set up. They're causing taxation on merchants and flow of business. The temples are actually the early banking system, it turns out. So, yeah. So, so when Jesus got up, the historical Jesus got up and railed against the temples and the merchants in the temples. He was talking about the money changers, right? There's banking going on in these temples. And he's already sitting on 2,000s of years of the Israelites trying to say, hold on a second. One God is the best of all and kicked Baal's ass. Baal is like goat dude who's like pretty powerful, and God smites the fuck out of him in the Bible, and then he just eats him. He's just done. Right? So according to the Israelites, there's one God who you will not, and then it gets transformed into, with Moses, into you won't have any other gods before me. You might have other gods in your little villages and stuff, but none of those come before me. I am the real God, right? So that's a concoction that comes about, and then has 3,000 years of impact. But I'm talking about real understanding. So if someone has a culture or a God, allow them to have their culture or their God. Humans need a belief system. That's part of the magic that glues us together, instead of being alone beetles, rhinoceros beetles, they're fucking just jabbing at each other and wrestling all day, right? We're actually a social animal. And one of the ways that we communicate our social sameness is belief in the same gods. We have the same moral code. Rain is good, justice is good, not sleeping around too much is good, not eating, shellfish in the middle of a desert is good, right? Like, so these are things that keep societies together, and we have our individualism, our maverick side. In American culture, we really believe in the individual, right? John Wayne, the big proud individual, right? That's our hero. Ronald Reagan, the fucking individual. John McCain ran as as a maverick, right? This is a guy who not only served in the army, underwent torture, so is strong as fuck in the mind, but has spent most of his life fitting into either the army or public service. How is he a maverick, right? But that's To say that you're just pushing against society a little bit and you're doing the right thing when everybody's kind of going morally in the wrong direction, that's the maverick. So that's what he's selling. That's what Ronald Reagan sells. That's what John Wayne sells. I might be a maverick, but I'm right. You know, and now maverick is used for someone like Donald Trump, right? So I am an outsider. I'm a billionaire. I am untouchable. I do what the fuck I want. Turns out that he is striking a chord the same way Bernie struck a chord with people who kind of had an Occupy frame of mind. Trump is striking a chord with people who've been displaced by Clinton era, Bush era, both together. They're the same fucking family, right? These are just rich white dudes who hang out in Kennebunkport in Martha's Vineyard and the islands off of Virginia, right? There's like the Carters and the Clintons and the fucking Bushes and, you know, there's just a number of families that control things, and so they're part of that, and they keep putting up their best son, and he run for president, and, you know, Hillary got this idea like, hey, I can be in the boys club. I built the fucking club for Bill, you know, it's my Rolodex that did it. So she's like, of course I want to crack at this. So, you know, it doesn't make any of them mavericks or outsiders. They're all in the same club. They all go to each other's weddings. I don't go to Donald Trump's wedding. What? So, synergy theory, right? Conspiracy theory is a couple people got together, met, hatched a plan, something happened, and it was never revealed, but it seemed like something else happened. Synergy theory. Two things or more happen together synergistically, and that creates a force or an event or an outcome that's maybe a little different. It required the synergy to make this event. So it's synergistic that an incompetent administration, mostly versed in politics of getting oil money to flow around the planet, banking money to flow around the planet. Bush is an oil man, right? Cheney had, you know, meetings with all the top Seven Sisters, which are among the 10 top richest companies in the world. So between oil and banking, and now it's indistinguishable, and they basically own military production and propaganda. That is to say, big media. Pretty much any media. It's about 98% of media are corporate owned these days. So, and that's actually just a fact. You can look it up. Like Fox, CNN, these are all owned like by General Electrics and co-owned by the things by Rockwell and General Dynamics, right? So the defense industries, the pharma industries, the telecommunication, everyone's all in the soup. They all actually, even if they don't have the same stock, they all have partnership agreements with each other to carve up markets and provide cross benefits. It turns out you can sell to everybody all the time. If you say Coke versus Pepsi, everyone goes Coke versus Pepsi, Coke versus Pepsi. Everyone's buying soda, right? Am I right? No one's going carrot juice, right? You know, water. Water, which municipal systems and town systems often happen to be some of the best water in the world. But now we have plastic water bottles, right? So was this a conspiracy theory or a synergy theory? Plastic gets super cheap. Municipal water systems begin to fail in places like Flint. Someone gets the idea of selling bottled water. Suddenly, people think the water comes in plastic bottles. Was there a conspiracy? No, it just maybe, but synergy is enough to prove that there's enough market forces that obviously it happens. So whether it's synergy or conspiracy, the fact is that the Rothschilds, you don't even need Illuminati, you don't need the Masons, you don't need any of that. The Rothschilds became one of the richest banking families in Europe. Not sure on the dates, but whenever it was. somewhere between the 1700s and the 1800s, and then branched their family out so that they had institutional family members in Britain, France, and Germany. And when the World War One came along, they lent money to all sides and cleaned up handsomely afterwards. And it was so good they decided to throw the party again and World War II. Conspiracy theory, if you believe the Rothschilds started World War II. Synergy theory, if you believe that the Brits didn't have money to beat the war machine that Hitler had, because Hitler had already borrowed money from the Brits and the United States, and eventually, when that failed, from the Rothschilds and all their other buddies and families. And then Churchill turns around and borrows money to pay to be the one country in Europe that didn't really fold and is taking all the heat. So he borrows a bunch of money and then eventually gets the Americans in. And the Americans funding is a little different. IBM certainly supported the Third Reich with the production of Hollerith cards, and that's another story. But the point is that there are rich families at the top just laughing all the way to the bank through all wars. And as we dissect wars years later, especially in the 30 to 100-year window, historians actually have the best view before it gets rewritten into whoever the ruling class is decides what the official history is. Actual histories of the Vietnam War are getting quite interesting right now. Some stuff about the Iraq War is actually available now. But we know, for example, there's lots of scholarship done on the Gulf of Tonkin incident, right? And other events or false flag events or real events that get blown out of proportion, like 9/11. Do we need a conspiracy theory to say something about 9/11? No. Are there some fishy things there? Yes. The synergy theory says 9/11 happened. Who cares how it happened? The next thing that happened is that George Bush got on TV less than 24 hours later and said it was bin Laden. Like he fucking knew. Within a very short time period, a 1,200-page Patriot Act was approved that had been sitting in someone's drawer ready for such a moment. This is synergistic. These things happened. Congress people voted on the Patriot Act without reading it. It stripped away at least 4 Bill of Rights amendments in practical use. They're still working on the second. So when Donald Trump appeals to Second Amendment rights activists, he's talking to a real concern, a real group of people in this country, including me. A blue state bubble liberal, white, upper middle class, well-educated, tech working, blue state liberal who doesn't buy any of it anymore. I don't buy the liberal line. I don't buy the Republican line. I don't buy the independent line. I'm kind of a green. It might be a back to the lander. I spent half the year in Vermont and try to live green. And when I'm in Berkeley, I try to live green, as you can see. And I just don't think we need cars and freeways and shit like that. But the point is that there is a vast moneyed top layer that is putting up this entire propaganda show and this dog and pony executive branch, actually. The executive is not supposed to have the power of pushing the button. The executive branch is not supposed to have the power of negotiating foreign treaties. This is the Senate's job. The executive branch is not supposed to have the power to drone people into death. That's the War Powers Act that Obama has basically completely obliterated. So I'm not a liberal anymore. I'm not a Democrat. I would have voted Democrat for Bernie, so I actually changed to Democratic to vote for Bernie. But I'll vote for Green because it's the only intelligent choice. We should represent for what we believe in, not for what we fear. It's ridiculous. Point being, there are poor Americans who believe in Donald Trump, and there are poor Americans in inner cities who believe in Hillary Clinton. Both of these groups of people have distrust of large levels of government and want local community control of things that make sense and don't just benefit big corporations, but do foster a decent economy. But the federal government should get the fuck out of the way. So, if most people could get together on this, why are we being divided on race? Why do certain benefits flow to certain races, and the races are kept antagonistic to each other, when real understanding would say there is a class difference in this country that we're just not addressing? Now, I love me some rich people. I go walking on their land. They're excellent stewards of the land. Many of them are very responsible business people. And they're doing well, and they're recognized by the marketplace. That's been going on for thousands of years, so I don't really see anything wrong with someone doing well. I see something wrong with someone doing so well that they can actually control the political motivation of a system and the economic balance of a system, and they can just legalize anything that anybody's town hall would be, denounced as completely amoral. Hey, Canadian, Alberta, tar sand mines. These giant, they look like the fucking Martian landscape in the middle of what should be a pretty, tundra kind of experience in Alberta, instead become like hell on earth. Open, searing pits of bubbling oil and shit. It's being steam injected and transferred into wells below wells, and it's like nothing will live here for tens of thousands of years. This is ridiculous, right? And the shit that it's releasing into the atmosphere, and the piping that has basically, that Obama doubled coming into this country, has changed, and now it's coming down to water protectors, right? Who are saying, hey, excuse us, remember when all the white kids were taught in school that there were some treaties, that some of them may have been kind of humorous sales, like we sold Manhattan for $1 or something. But at the end of the day, and the end of all the wars and all the custers you threw at us, you eventually signed some treaties. You're now coming back with your corporate structures and breaking these treaties. After all the little school children in the U.S. were taught it's okay because now these people have reservations and we have treaties. No, sorry, Uncle Sam's still trying to fuck them up the ass, and it's because of corporate stuff. So look up something, I think it's called the Ludlow Massacre. Same thing happened for poor whites mining for coal in formerly Indian country in the West. The feds just came in with private contractors, and if they didn't shoot everybody with Gatling guns, then they burned them in pits and trenches and with canvas tarps over them, and just built these huge fires and stuff, and just blew the fuck up out of everybody. Hundreds of people died, and many of them women and children. These are camps that coal miners were striking, and so the feds came in and busted the whole thing up. So this is exactly the same game, different year. It's same fucking thing. But no community supports this effort. It's the fact that we're all sitting in these cush cities, driving these cars, running these air-conditioned houses in places where we shouldn't even be living. Fucking Arizona. Give me a break. Should be building clay houses, not like wood frame houses with air conditioning. Like, what? We're driving cars when we could have trains or bicycles or walk, or actually live in our communities where we work instead of, I know people in the Bay Area, very, very, very common. 1.5-hour commute, one direction. It happens. I'm actually expected to do it for work, except I do it all remotely. But most people will actually drive or commute 1/2 hour to 1.5 hours, easy, right? Why don't we why don't we work from home? Why don't we live close to where we work? Why not electric cars? Why not bicycles? Right? Like all of these things are things that we would decide on a community, but instead they're being pushed up into the marketplace, into these giant global corporations that have been given specific legal personage in the U.S. system, and now the global legal framework that's actually being discussed in NAFTA and TPP is like which courts will have jurisdiction over countries and companies and citizens trying to make laws that thwart companies. So it's all fucking tied together. There's a big ring of power. And they put war and divisiveness between us, when really it's just a bunch of people who want to eat good food, dance, live in a nice place, hang out and play music together, and, you know, garden and you know, like that's what most people would do, would be to hang out, work enough to make sure there's food and housing, and, you know, like I built this place for $2,000, right? It's withstood 80-mile-an-hour winds. It's great. It's got, you know, it works in California. I don't need a code house here. So really, people should be getting together because they're people, and saying anything that is unethical, unmoral behavior that I wouldn't personally support. Why would I support through a network of needs and demands and consumerism? If we had more consciousness and more accountability, and as Ajamu Baraka says, a transparent government that actually does our will rather than secrecy upon secrecy, backed with military effectiveness. This is not community. This is Orwellian superstate telling us how to be and what to do, and God, we better get this. We better vote for Hillary and get the Supreme Court right, because if not, the feds could be coming in here and busting our asses for gay butt sex, right? That's what people are worried about with the fucking, you know, with the Supreme Court. How do we have a system that allows us to, you know, take away a woman's right to decide what goes on with her body, or a couple's right to do whatever the fuck they want with curtains drawn? Like, why? Because we allow these governments this kind of power. We would never allow the town council that kind of power. We fucking break. So it's because we have this top-down thing. So a lot of people who think this way end up being on the libertarian end of the spectrum, or the anarchist end of the spectrum, or sort of the Tea Party end of the spectrum. And I propose that, you know, many of these spectra are actually want sort of the same things, which is we want local control. We want reasonable, humanist behavior from our transparent government that is just us governing things. We don't really need a global arms race. We don't really need these interventionist wars that cause terrorism to happen. It's all in response to all this shit that we're doing. This oil, for oil? We don't even need oil. 100 years ago, we didn't need oil. Why do we need oil now? Anyway, I think what truly happens is we can, I've seen this as a musician, we can bond with each other. Dancing, music, these are universal languages. We can have cultural exchanges, poetry and science and dancing. Did I mention dancing? If I'm going to go to Tehran, I would rather go in a Tehran that has discotheques. I hear that when they had discotheques, they were fucking amazing. And with, you know, fundamentalist government there kind of cracking things down, not so great. But when you have a local control of government that allows cultural exchange, people go like, okay, it's all right to be as fundamentalist as you want. You've got your community, you've got your church, you've got your mosque, whatever. But you realize you're going to have to live with neighbors who might not have the same code as you. The more cultural exchange, the more music, the more dancing, the more poetry, the more talking, the more science, the more education, the more empowerment of everybody. You know, I could put in a long list, you know, people of color, women, children, you know, people of different sexual agenda, blah 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 blah. What I'm really talking about is there are people who are all want the same thing, and then other people come along and try to manipulate and say these people want to shoot you and these people want to kill you. You know, most people are not marauders. Most people are. Most of the violence in the world is either hired mercenary violence, or is people so desperate because they've been so fucked up by all of the above that they then go join the fray. I don't think most people with their basic needs met. And we clearly have, if we have enough to produce this kind of, I mean, give me a break. The trillions of dollars we spend on war and the few billions it would take to feed everybody on the planet. So there's plenty to go around. The rest is just, do you believe in a money system that rewards those who've incorporated and who actually remove money from the system and offshore. They've removed wealth and left behind a wake of debt in their hands. So you end up with a debt economy, and these guys have all the zeros. You don't have to be an anti-free marketer to say that kind of capitalism is doomed. But that kind of capitalism been very, very good to the Rothschilds.